I want to bring to the stage a couple of our colleagues, and what we're going to do is we're going to give you a sneak preview of what the queer community looks like in the UK, which we have done, I'm delighted to say, in partnership with YouGov, and we will release that in spring 2023. So to tell you all about it, please welcome to the stage the head of UK Products, Profiles and Brand Index at YouGov, Greg Dagger, and co-director of Insight at Outvertising and head of Insight and Strategy at PS London, Kendra Rogers.
Thank you. Thank you. Aha.
Going to take a side of the stage each.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Nancy. That was incredible. I feel like as a Canadian, so glad to see the trans data there. The design might need work, but I'll see if I can pull some strings on that. Hello, thank you so much for being here. Greg and I are thrilled to be standing in front of you today, sharing some never-before-seen insight into the consumption patterns of the queer community in Great Britain. I'm Kendra Rogers. As mentioned, I'm the co-director of Insight and Agitation at Outvertising and the head of Insight and Strategy at PS London, and my pronouns are she and her.
Thank you, Kendra. And welcome, everyone. It's great to see so many people in the audience. I'm really excited to hear some of the discussions that are going to take place today. I'm Greg Dagger, head of products at YouGov, and my pronouns are he, him. YouGov, for those who don't know, is an international market research agency, data analytics firm, headquartered here in London.
Today, we will present a sneak peek into the findings of the Consumer Report focused on queer spending that is set to be released in spring 2023. As a remedy to a lack of robust and respected data, Outvertising teamed up with YouGov to produce a comprehensive report that digs into LGBTQ+ preferences and habits when it comes to brands. The presentation will include learnings from the larger report, including some surprising insights about the brand's preferred media consumption and differences in preferences across the community for sectors including automotive, FMCG, entertainment, and more.
To be amongst the first to receive this report next spring, have your phones ready at the end of this presentation, and you'll be sent a cheeky little link to make sure you're on that VIP list.
QR codes. So why do we set out to create a better understanding of the UK's LGBTQ+ community as consumers? Our motivation is rooted in Outvertising's purpose, which is to make UK advertising and marketing completely LGBTQ+ inclusive. And as brand marketers and agency folk, we couldn't find any easy to understand, bespoke, detailed consumer data on the LGBTQ+ community. We all agreed that that wasn't very inclusive, so we turned to our friends at the Market Research Society who agreed with us. And together, we set out to put that right. YouGov were quickly identified as a potential partner, and they enthusiastically shared our vision. And so we started working together to bring the first queer consumer report to life. So today's presentation is a preview. We hope that it sparks some ideas with all of the brilliant brains in the room by painting a picture of the UK LGBTQ+ community as consumers. And we will have a Q&A at the end. We really hope that you'll share your thoughts, your ideas, your questions that might help us guide the final report, the final output of the report. And if there's something that your clients or your brand have previously pondered about how to create more inclusive advertising, please reach out. We want to think about how we can include that in the report as well.
Definitely. The full report will be published in the spring of 2023. Starting to sink in now, isn't it?
Repetition.
To ensure it is as accessible as possible for everyone, the report will be free to download. We envisage it being an important part of every brand marketer's and agency folks' toolkit going forward, equipped with a much better understanding of the LGBTQ+ consumer. We're confident the insights the report contains will help everyone make their work more inclusive and more authentic, and as a result, more effective.
So, why does representation matter to business? Because we know that LGBTQ+ inclusion works. For example, according to a study by Kantar Millward Brown, 3 out of 4 LGBTQ+ themed ads outperform generic ads in driving brand recall. And Think with Google recently reported that 45% of consumers under 34 say they are more likely to do repeat business with LGBTQ+ friendly brands. It's about the economic value, and so much more. Everyone in this room are privileged to work in the advertising and marketing sector, and because of that, we have a privilege and a responsibility to bring about greater acceptance in society by using the power of advertising for good.
Okay, so on to methodology. We all know methodology is important when analysing any data set. This is why we wanted to cover it off up front. YouGov Profiles has been used to extract all the insights presented today and in the future reports. YouGov Profiles is constantly collecting data every day of the year across thousands of people and thousands of questions. The Profiles data set we'll talk about today is weighted to be nationally representative, with weekly updates taking place. And the data you'll see today is from our dataset dated the 11th of September this year. The key to unlocking insights within profiles is using something called the Z-score. The Z-score helps us determine significant differences between the groups we're exploring further and what makes them different from the general population, for example. Today, there is a focus on the preferences of lesbian women, bisexual people, and gay men. For example, that's to mean respondents that selected their gender as female for gender and lesbian for sexuality within YouGov research. I'm sure you're thinking now, what about trans, non-binary, intersex people? Unfortunately, the sample sizes available at present are not robust enough to include today, but this is a key focus for us to address before the publication of the larger report next spring. With all research, some groups are harder to reach than others. At YouGov, we're very conscious of inclusion within the entire community, and we're always seeking to improve our data, a challenge we're looking to conquer next year.
And it's really important that Greg mentioned that because both Outvertising and YouGov stand in solidarity with all parts of the LGBTQ plus community. So when you read LGB within this presentation, it is because the data does not yet reflect all of the LGBTQ plus community, but it is our intention to rectify this representation within the larger report because we recognize the importance of standing with the entire community, especially in the midst of the rise in hate groups attempting to peel off sections of the community. Finally, before we dig in, just a quick bit of housekeeping. We'll be referring to NatRep a lot. This is a bit of a nerdy presentation, so I'm sorry. That is the nationally representative sample within Great Britain. We're going to get to the good part soon.
As Kendra said, the data presented is from Profiles Great Britain, so just to be completely clear, there's no data there from Northern Ireland, so we're looking at England, Wales, and Scotland. Okay, so our first visual aid. The pie chart on the left represents over 242,000 people that are within YouGov Profiles Great Britain. They're all aged 18 plus. In numbers, how that breaks down, there's over 200,000 people who identify as straight, over 9,000 who identify as gay or lesbian, and over 10,000 who identify as bisexual. We also have an other and a prefer not to say. So the other actually is about 3,000 people, and prefer not to say is about 10,500 people. So we've got a lot of data, and obviously we're talking about kind of not including trans people, for example. They may be included elsewhere. We can only infer that. We can't say for certain.
And we recognize that the community is broad and diverse, and this chart maybe is overly simplistic. There are other fluid terms, such as pansexual, that are likely to be represented within this data, shown in the bisexual group, but not yet broken down as such due to current sampling. There are also various sexual orientations that we'd like to break down further, including asexuality and the way it can interrelate with other sexual identities. The survey focused on these three demographics, straight, gay and lesbian, and bisexual, but we hope to continue to evolve the report to reflect our community's various sexual orientations in the future. We've said that repeatedly because it really does matter so much, and we want you to know that.
Definitely. Then moving on to the right-hand side of the screen, we've got the gender breakdown. Is the split surprising in any way? Did you suspect the split? I'll let that kind of sink in. And a question to think about for a few seconds. We should note here that while the larger report will include ethnicity and country of birth, that information won't be explored in today's presentation. Further data we'll present to you today will only build on your knowledge and your understanding of these groups. Kendra and I are hopeful you'll walk away from today having learnt something new. Okay, so on next chart, a shift is taking place. Remember that. Looking at historical data as well as the data captured in the here and now is important. A previous study conducted by YouGov builds on the understanding of sexuality as a spectrum. YouGov asked Britons where they would place themselves on the Kinsey scale of 0 to 6, where 0 is completely heterosexual and 6 is completely homosexual. This study was run in 2015 and again in 2019. What we're looking at here is those who are aged 18 to 24. So in 2019, those aged 18 to 24 versus those aged 18 to 24 in 2015. And 2015 to 2019, they're half as likely to identify as gay or lesbian, kind of the first red shape on the left. And then further changes have happened too. They're 8 times more likely to identify as bisexual, as we can see kind of in the middle. While we can't say for certain, absolutely, that again, we may infer that the increase in identification as bisexual could be indicative of the shift away from definitive categorizations of hetero or homosexual, explained by the expanding understanding of sexuality's fluidity and its existence on a spectrum. Okay, so within that same study, so kind of focusing out or zooming out and looking at kind of Britons as a whole, within that same study, we can see that 1 in 4 Britons place themselves somewhere in between 1 to 5. We as a group here today need to understand that the LGBTQ plus consumer group is much larger than we might have first thought. We can use what we learned today and available in the larger report to guide us, but we must also bear in mind change is inevitable. So being able to adapt what we do and how we do it is essential. So what is the opportunity out there? Okay, it's huge. So from profiles, we know that there's an estimated 7 million adults who identify as LGBTQ+. We can't accept that in isolation, absolutely not. There are many friends, families, members, allies, co-workers who are also part of this opportunity, and absolutely an opportunity that cannot be ignored.
In many ways, our community reflects the larger NatRep, but there were some key differences wherein the community of lesbian, gay, and bisexual people over-indexed when compared to the nationally representative sample. So our audience were younger, with 52% under the age of 35. They are more educated, and while where religion is a factor, we see similarities with the rest of the population reporting Christianity, Church of England, and Catholicism. A massive 64% report being atheist or agnostic.
So they are younger, more educated, less religious, but where do they live? So we saw that more of our LGB audience live in urban areas versus rural ones, slightly higher than the general population, or the NatRep. And focusing on the top counties where they live, Greater London, Manchester, and the West Midlands are top 3. You may have expected London in there. Would you have known about Manchester and the West Midlands? Exploring a level further and splitting it by these 4 groups here, bi women, bi men, lesbian women, and gay men. We can see that of those LGBT people living in London, a greater proportion is made up of gay men. Of those living in the West Midlands, it's a fairly even split. And in the east of England, for example, there are more bi and lesbian women. When planning regional versus national campaigns, this split could be something to bear in mind.
LGBT Brits are significantly more likely to describe themselves as being on the left end of the political spectrum at 46% when compared with 28% of the NatRep. Interestingly, that lean evens itself out slightly more in the center with a 7% difference over right wing with a 6% difference. Now that we understand who our audience is and a bit about their demographics, let's dig into the brand preferences. Okay. So,
LGBT people are active consumers of the same brands as the general public, but with a few interesting diversions, notably preferring Diet Coke, Schweppes, Odeon, and favouring Android and iPhone over Samsung. And thinking back to the methodology overview earlier, these stats were selected based on larger deviations in that Z score. So all differences, no matter how big or small, are significant. Okay, digging a little bit deeper using the Z-score, we began to look at different audiences within the larger community when compared to their straight counterparts. This is where some really interesting anomalies emerged. What if I told you 22% of lesbians drive a Vauxhall in 2022, as opposed to 7% of straight women? Would that shift the way that you pitched ideas to Vauxhall?
Is there anyone in the room from eBay? Does it surprise you to know that you're performing better with lesbians than straight women? These are just the start of the type of insight that we can gather from YouGov's current customer database. And Working in strategy, personally, I spend my days hunting for brilliant insights that we can use to build campaigns that truly resonate. And if I worked for or with Iron Brew, and I saw that 22% of lesbians regularly drink Iron Brew, as opposed to 4% of straight women, I'd start thinking about how we could take advantage of that brand preference and create something resonant with an audience that is already actively engaged with our brand. When looking at gay men and straight men, we saw some further interesting areas of over-index, namely with gay men being more avid users of Apple Music, Transport for London, and Deliveroo. They're also twice, I love that everyone's engaging with this, it's great. They're also twice as likely as straight men to be current customers of Pizza Hut, and that did urge me to order Pizza Hut while designing this deck, so it worked. Stuffed crust pizza, in fact. We then looked at bisexual people as compared with people who identified as straight within YouGov's platform and found that bisexual people are significantly higher users of Reddit. I think we actually might have some Reddit folks in the audience today. So let's chat about how advertising can help support you in activating on that brand preference. Our bisexual audience also over-indexed on entertainment like Pokemon and Spotify, a love of Ben & Jerry's, and the skincare products that Palmolive offer. So after getting excited by the opportunities for brand allegiance, we wanted to think about this differently. I hope we all recognize that when speaking to the LGBTQ+ community, you aren't speaking to one homogenous group. Our initial findings show that the LGBT core have different preferences than lesbians, bisexual people, or gay men. And those different preferences paint very interesting pen portraits when it comes to things like culture, where there shows a preference for the Tate Modern among bisexuals, the Science Museum among lesbians, and the Royal Academy of Arts among gay men. We can see other key differences across high street retail, fast food and pubs, and TV and radio. If you had to list your favorite fast food or pub, where would you fall on this list?
I'm a fan of KFC, I have to say. To wrap up the brand preference section, we found even more interesting deviations from the NAP rep. I'm going to focus on one of these. Noticeably, lesbians are over-indexing in being customers of Royal Bank of Scotland. When we add that to what we discovered earlier, over-indexing on a love of Iron Brew and a likelihood to live in Scotland, a much deeper understanding of them is being formed. This is just the beginning.
And our gay men were more likely to drive a Range Rover and use the London Underground with minty fresh breath, so Listerine.
Okay, so we're going to move on to media now. Focusing on media consumption. A quick disclaimer, our LGB audience media consumption is largely similar to that of the general population. As with brands, we pulled out where the biggest differences are using the Z-score. Within streaming, there on the left-hand side, YouTube stands out by far, alongside Disney Plus and Netflix. But what are they watching? The Witcher, Stranger Things, Ozark? A question for another time. Come and find me at the end. What we can confirm today, though, is how they search for TV shows. Searching by theme is key, so binge-worthy or good versus evil. Recommendations are also high on the list. So think back to the wider opportunity. The influence of friends, family, allies, and co-workers. They'll play a part here too. We have Bloomberg top for TV channels, The Guardian for newspapers, and GQ for magazines. Thinking about news preferences. We had The Guardian, FT, and The Independent as top newspapers read. We explored their main source of news, and LGB are more likely to use a news app on a mobile or social networks to keep up to date, significantly less likely to get their news from television. We're starting to understand they spend a lot of time online, and we're going to explore that a little bit further. So thinking about social media now, our LGB sample is more likely to be members of all popular social media platforms, with the exception of Facebook. So you can see the kind of differences there. Is this related to their age? We found out that half of them are kind of under the age of 35. Possibly something else. Any ideas from the audience at all? Anyone brave enough to contribute?
Brave enough to say something while in Meta's offices. We could tackle that at the end.
Okay. So, YouTube is a key media channel for LGB audience. We thought we'd try to understand the usage of it further. So video sharing websites such as YouTube are used to watch sports, They are relied upon for advice when buying a new car. They're used for inspiration when cooking and for ideas about the next holiday destination. Think about what you use video sharing websites for. I'm sure it's very similar. And we actually found large similarities when comparing to the general population. But these were some of the significant differences. Our final insight snippet to share with you today is exploring LGBT consumers' online habits beyond video sharing websites and some of their attitudes towards ads. Our LGBT audience are more likely to engage with ads seen via social media than regular websites. That's 35% of them versus 22% of the NatRep. Seeing offers on social media leads nearly a fifth to purchase. Wow. That is one fact you can take away and run with today. That is actionable insight. What about the third who agree ads help them choose what they buy? Or the 61% who love to recommend things for people to try? The size of the opportunity we spoke about earlier is growing, isn't it? Okay, that's a wrap. Kendra.
Okay, so what can we learn from all of this? And we created these slides for exactly what you were just doing, which is taking pictures of them, bring them, talk about them, let's have conversations.
Absolutely. Firstly, expect the unexpected. You aren't speaking to one homogenous group. As you've seen, the LGBT core have different expectations than lesbians, bisexual people, or gay men. And that's just where we could quantify.
And sometimes expect the expected. Some stereotypes ring true, some come up as blatantly false. You can't know until you look at the data, and when in doubt, always err on the side of due diligence. And there are tons of brilliant light bulb moments for brands and agencies to activate on. Unique campaign insights can be found within this community's consumption and preferences, and brand preferences can and should be encouraged.
And lastly, but most importantly, the point that was made at the beginning of our presentation, with a significant proportion of the UK's consumer spending tied to LGBTQ+ consumer footprint, brands would be wise to consider that the positive commercial impact of inclusion and representation is beneficial in reaching not just the LGBTQ+ community, but also their friends, family, allies, and co-workers.
Mark the date in your diary now, spring 2023 for the consumer report being published with the insights we've shared here, plus so much more from across the LGBTQ+ community, including trans plus insight.
We hope that you took away some ideas to get started with and that you can find more information and inspiration in our upcoming report.
Thank you so much for your time. And just as a final note, we are all volunteers at Outvertising, and we need more volunteer energy to get this report over the line. So if you would like to help compile the report, please come grab me during networking. Now we'd like to do some Q&A, and we'd like to invite up our colleague, Tishan Nicholas, who I think I see in the very back there, who's a member of the advertising community and analytics director at the 7 Stars, and who has been absolutely invaluable in putting together the report alongside Greg and myself. I didn't know if you were here.
Okay. Oh, got it. I like this. Yeah. This is our throwing mic. So be ready to catch it if you've got a question, okay?
Oh, gosh. Or we can pass it to you gently if you have no sports skills like I do. Does anyone have any questions or anything to share? Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much. I just thought I'd break the seal. What was the most surprising thing that you saw in the data that you kind of loved, that you haven't spoken about today?
Probably should have saved the Iron Brew one, because that was my favorite. I thought it was great. And also drank an Iron Brew. I think throughout going through the data, I just realized how susceptible I am to brands, because I kept going, ooh, I would like an Iron Brew. Oh, shoot. What is my Canadianism is not going to work. It's the drink that people sometimes have when they are a little bit hungover, and it's got electrolytes in it.
Lucozade.
Lucozade. Yeah, there was a large preference of Lucozade for both bisexual people and lesbians, so I thought that was interesting as well. And then I drank a Lucozade, which are nice even if you're not hungover.
Were there any particular brands that you thought weren't tapping into a preference that you found?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think as you kind of said at the start, this is kind of the first of this type of project.
Yeah, show us more.
Undertaken. There's quite a few, to be honest. And I think that, hopefully taking some of the stats from today and taking the report next year can help people to understand it, even if it's not specifically talking about that brand, maybe about that industry or that sector, or even just kind of habits or behaviours or trends that come through. You can definitely kind of think about that, take that on board, and take it back to your company, your organisation, whatever it might be.
There were lots of interesting.
shame.
We're not going to be like, oh, your brand sucks. We'd prefer to do the ones that are great. But it was really interesting to see that there are definitely under indexes. I guess there are preferences away from certain brands, and I think that's actually a great shout because that's a really important opportunity for brands to be considering as well. The ones that are not resonating, why are they not resonating? Can we have some conversations about that? And we hope to explore some of that within the larger report.
Hi. You mentioned in one of those slides there that LGBTQ plus people are more likely to engage with ads on social media. Is there anything in the report that kind of establishes how LGBTQ people pay attention across the board, not only social media, but digital display, for instance, YouTube, TV, in relation to the nat rap, just to get down with the lingo there?
I don't know.
We haven't included that, but that's a great shout, and we definitely will. Will you come chat with me after?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Some of those hard-to-reach groups that are underrepresented in the quant, do you have plans to pursue that through qual? I'm a qualitative.
Yes.
I'm an
Yeah,
qual,
that's exactly our plan. Okay. And I think part of what we're working with YouGov on is how we want this to be, despite being a lot of work, a yearly thing if we can do it, right? So how do we start to help YouGov to make sure that we have that data in the quant, but then also how do we augment in the meantime with qualitative is something we're thinking about. And I want to talk to you. I think you want to help me with this.
I think I might. Yeah.
Any more questions in the room?
You mentioned about TfL being one of the brands on that, but I wanted to know what you expected for TfL. Like brands like TfL, you have to use no matter what. So, what would you expect them to use with this data? So, for instance, the reason why I asked that is that you have to use the tube and you have to use the bus systems, and it's a bit like Network Rail. You have to use those to get in and out of London. So, what would you like to see them using this data for, and how would you like them to apply it throughout their systems?
Yeah, I think you can kind of establish facts and say, of the people who use our service, who are they, what do they look like, how can we engage them? Taking the media preferences, how can we talk to them? And then it's not just in isolation, it's kind of that's your starting point, that's our group. And then we try and learn more about them. So, I don't know, how likely are they to walk to work? How can we make sure they do use our service? How can we make sure that we are putting ourselves out there as an organisation that is for everyone? So, it's interesting we kind of put data together, but the interpretation of that, how you use it, how you action it, it could be lots and lots of different ways. But I think that's your starting point. That's, okay, we've got some data of people who use our service, and what else can we learn about them? Or even, we had no idea that group of people used our service, or that proportion of people used our service as well.
I think the other thing that was interesting is that because the community was over-indexing, that I feel like there's a lot of little nuggets in there that hopefully people can take away and go, hey, TfL, you're already running a campaign, but what if we made it bigger? Because actually we're seeing that there's an over-index of the LGBTQ plus population that is taking Transport for London. So I think it's what we were hoping to do with today's presentation, and you made a great point of like we couldn't possibly include everything we wanted to, was to maybe give you some nuggets that you can go, hey, I actually work with this brand, or hey, I actually and within this media company, I'm going to take this stat to them, and that might open the doors because sometimes those hard facts can be really great conversation starters.
We saw a lot of stats about consumption. I was curious if your research also focused on representation and their feelings or their opinions on how the community is able to see themselves. I want to say the big screen, but we are also like digital, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
So kind of, we have a lot of attitudinal data and psychographic data that will help us understand more about how people feel, where they kind of lean. And there's some questions in there, and I've my colleague Thomas is in the room, so if I forget anything, Thomas, just shout up. Around, I want to see more people like me in adverts and things like that. So again, not included today. There's a lot of data that we collect, and it's trying finding those most insightful bits. But also, there's going to be so many questions in the room that we don't know what we're going to answer when we're going to answer. But yeah, we have attitudinal data in there that I think would really open the door around that kind of that question, especially one that sticks in mind is that want to see more people like me in advertising, or I relate to adverts that include me. But yeah. Thomas, I can't. Is there anything else you want to add?
Just from the, can this work? Yeah. Just off the top of my head, there's certain questions such as I relate better to adverts where I see real people in as well, and it kind of all ties in. So what you can start doing is building out that pen portrait of how this relates. And in a way to add on to the question about TFL, it wouldn't strictly be about these people use TFL, but also a lot of things about advertising around at bus stops and tube stations as well. So it's not just TFL per se, but the whole ecosystem around, say, the commuter journey that you can start building out a picture on.
Which is what places?
I've been absolutely amazed by how much data exists within YouGov profiles, and it feels like every day we're kind of learning new things. You mentioned that you can actually you've asked people what animal they most identify with. Which is gonna go in the report. So I haven't analyzed that yet, but I will let you know as soon as we do. But there's just you can go down rabbit holes while eating Pizza Hut for hours.
Stuffed crust. Any more questions? Okay.
Hello. I guess I wanted to understand a bit more about how age plays a part in this, because I think that overall population is great, but I think it gets skewed quite dramatically when you take into account age. So how has that been accounted for in the data? And is there already a skew that exists within the YouGov population anyway? So do you only look at data from 18 plus, for example?
So the profiles data set that is 18 plus. Within the UK, I think we have about 2.5 million members who answer questions or surveys for us. So we can go to a lower age. It depends on what the project is. With the profiles data set, it's kind of almost an ecosystem, and that's weighted to be nationally represented. So we're absolutely trying our best to make sure that we're covering off everyone or trying to include everyone within it. Obviously, we saw from the kind of breakdown of sexuality that we don't ask, or we don't give all the answer options that we could. So that's something that Thomas and I are feeding back to our data team to try and resolve, and as I said, kind of hopefully in time for next year as well. But then, we've got qualitative data where we can add in when we need it. In terms of skews, I'm not sure. I think it depends on how you cut that data. Real kind of political answer there for you, but I think we can have a chat. I've got my laptop with me, so if you wanted to explore anything after this session or kind of later on, then we can delve into that profiles data set. If it's specific questions, whatever it might be. So,
thanks.
Adding to that, it's not working. Adding to that, I think where we notice there is a skew, such as the political spectrum, is something that we can deep dive into and look at that, say, at an age split. And so when we add it to the overall report, we'll overlay, actually, these are the nuances we're seeing at an age level. But yeah, that'll be the bigger report. So yeah, sign up, QR code, do it.
Spring next year, did you say?
Awesome. Thank you all so much.